Hi, Graham Vincent, violin maker and musician. It's Friday. It's Q&A time. Q&A number 6. So yeah, I mean, I've got some questions that you left on the last Q&As, and also I've got some things that arose from a couple of other videos that I've done as well. So we'll tackle those. Before I do that, there was a really stupid error that I made in the last Q&As. I actually said that the front of the bridge wants to be at 90 degrees to the underside of the front plate. I actually meant the back of the bridge, so if you did set it at the front, the thing would be leaning forward slightly, whereas in fact you want it leaning back very slightly. It's correct on my plans that I sell. It's correct on the violins that I make. I think it was like inability to multitask, to actually to sort of think and use my mouth at the same time. But there we go. Sorry about that. I hope I haven't caused anyone any sort of sleepless nights with that one. Yeah, Patreon. I won't dwell on this, but basically I'm doing Patreon, as you know, and I'm going to be making a violin this coming year, which will be given away to one of the people who is a Patreon contributor, and that will be done as a draw. And basically every dollar, we'll work in dollars, shall we? Every dollar that you put in, so if you're buying, if you're paying $5 a month effectively, that would mean that at the end of the year you would have 5 times 12 entries. If you're contributing $10, for example, it would be 10 times 12 entries. So anyway, I haven't decided quite what I'm going to make yet, but it will nevertheless be a handmade violin by me. So that should be fun, and I will probably actually do that as an ongoing video on the channel as well, just so you can see the progress of that one. And I wanted to say hello, Thomas, Aaron and Owen, who are Patreon sort of donors already. Fantastic. So most generous. I also wanted to say hello, Elijah. Right. Questions and answers, hopefully. Andrew Parrish, 437. Are there any annual meetings / shows where prospective violin / fiddle makers get together and exhibit or share their experiences? I mean, I know obviously of professional shows and so on. I don't know of any amateur ones. And I mean, obviously I've had a look and a think at this question, and although it's really tempting for me to say, oh, let's organize one, let's do that. The thing is, because we are all meeting here on the internet, we are globally quite far flung, literally from Australia, the sort of, let me see, I think the Philippines, sort of certainly South America, plenty of guys in North America, Europe. So we're all over the place. So the chances of getting everyone together at one place and one time are pretty remote. However, that is something we could do on Zoom, isn't it? So maybe we should start a conversation about how we're going to sort of do maybe a twice a year Zoom meeting where everyone gets together, everyone prepares, has photographs, images, has a violin to show, has a load of questions, and we can just have like, a couple of hours of just solid Zoom call sort of interaction. Just a thought. Let me know what you think. Okay. Yeah. WM Crash. I think I forgot to ask questions the last 2 weeks, so I need to make up for it. It's not obligatory. You don't have to. Are you any closer to make one of those Stroh violins? I think I remember some trumpet-shaped parts hanging on your wall. You're correct, and I can see they're all still there. In all honesty, I don't think I've got enough hours in the day. I'm still trying to master how to make wooden violins, and that's I think where I should be concentrating my efforts, really. I'd love a Stroh violin. I think they're fantastic, but they have quite a powerful sound, don't they? They're very distinctive, not for all occasions. So yeah, it's like so many things. There's so many things I'd like to do, and that's certainly one of them. But being realistic about it, I think the chances are quite limited. WM Crash's second question: for a decent weekend woodworker and machinist with access to all the instructional material and supplies, how many completed violins would you say it takes to find out if you could eventually make some decent violins? Or if you're better off focusing on something else? Right, okay. Well, I would say you'd know from the first one, in all honesty. I would say go ahead and make a violin, make it the best you possibly can, and you will learn so much from the first one. And much in the same way, in all honesty, that I'm still learning from every single violin I make now. I'm kind of thinking, oh, I need to refine that, or I won't do it that way again, and so on. I mean, you know that on the last two violins, I actually did the purfling after the bodies were both assembled, and that's the first time I've ever done that. It was interesting. I think in practice I should probably now do this current couple of violins and go back to what I was doing before, just to sort of as a real compare and contrast. But I things like that, and then I'm sort of playing around with changing sort of mold types and so on, because there's always something to learn, and it wouldn't be much fun if there wasn't, would it? So, but to answer your question, I think you'd know fairly early on, and I think certainly, I mean, the most remarkable improvement for me was between violin 1 and 2, and then there's 2 and 3 less an improvement, but nevertheless, an incremental improvement, which I as I say, I hope is still going on. So there we are. I hope that answers that one. Right, okay, DIY dark matter. Now this ties in with a couple of the other questions, actually. So here we go. DIY dark matter. Graham Buddy, I ask a lot of questions because they're in my mind and bother me unless I do. That's fair enough. I think that's the best thing to do with questions. The answer is not always what's expected, and that's good because I learn from it. Okay, simple question. I may have asked this before, but it's one I ask to most artists if I get a chance. And I think the violin making is art in its highest form. I get disappointed, not from their answers, but when they get hung up on these rules that it has to be this way or that way, or it's just not a violin. Personally, whoever made these rules should be kicked right in the button. Okay, so on to the question. As a violin maker, who I'm guessing has seen all types of violins, do you have a violin that's resting in the back of your mind? The great white whale of violins, so to speak, that you want to make, that you consider your masterpiece of masterpieces. Now, I don't even make violins, but I know I do. In fact, it's a set. So I haven't got quite following that question. Now, I may never make them. Chances are that they are very good, in fact, but I still do. Sorry, you've lost me there, DIY dark matter, on that last bit. But I think basically you quite clearly have a violin in mind. Okay, yeah, mine are a bit eccentric, but hey, if you're going to dream, go big. Yep, I do agree. So yeah, question is, do you have a dream violin you want to make? Let me tackle this with these other two as well. Paul Anderson, 6401. Is it possible to completely make a violin with British indigenous wood species? Simple question. Sticulari. Regarding wood choice, have you ever used holly as a hardwood for the hardwood aspect? Holly being the wood historically used for handbells due to its sonority. So, yeah, okay, DIY dark matter. I do throw all sorts of ideas around in my head, and some forms and shapes have yet to fully appear in the mist, so to speak. I have been speaking to an artist about me producing a slightly unusual violin, which I would just hand over to them and they would then take it forward and decorate it. Did I mention that before? I think I did. So that's part the answer to your question. And then, but the dream violin answer to your question and these other two questions as well is I cut down a willow tree in our garden here about 10 years ago, and I also cut down a holly tree, both which were growing in the wrong place, and I purposefully put some of that timber aside, and it's been seasoning in the workshop for the last few years. Going back to, is it possible to completely make a violin with British indigenous wood species? The one part of that which you don't seem to be able to do with indigenous British timbers is the violin front. So that was one of the original things that drove me towards reclaiming timber, you know, sort of floorboards and so on being used for violin making. But also it's one of the things that's led me to experiment a couple of times with hardwood for the fronts, because my dream violin, which I hope to tackle sometime in the next 18 months, is going to be made completely and utterly from wood from my garden. It would be a violin. The one I have in my mind has probably got a willow front, willow back, sides, neck. The accessories would be holly, and probably there's a shrub in the garden which produces a timber which is almost like boxwood. It's really hard, and I'm thinking I'll probably make the pegs out of that. So this wouldn't be a violin that I'd ever sell, but it would be one that I hope, yeah, I would like. In my mind, it sounds amazing, but I mean, I would hope that it sounds great, and I would hope that that would become my, you know, my go-to violin, my evermore violin. So yeah, that's the answer to that one, really. Yeah, I do hope to tackle that, because it would mean a lot to me, obviously. It'd be quite interesting for me. Okay, Monty Latham 739 asked a question last time, which we kind of touched on, about the tight bond hide glue, and that seems to have elicited quite a few less than positive experiences that people have, you know, the comments of people had experiences with it. Gervais Gallant has had two neck joints fail because of it. Yankee Doodle has had a couple of seams come apart during the summer because of it. So I think everyone is kind of thinking, you know, do you know what? Stick with hot hide glue, the traditional stuff. It probably makes sense. And like I said in that video that I did me using it, it's actually pretty simple to use. It sounds a little bit daunting, but it's not that difficult. So if you've not used it before, have a look at that video. It's not too bad, honestly. Right. Now, one of the things about people's usernames on YouTube is you're never quite sure of the pronunciation. So I've got one here, which I presume is Mitchell Nagamak Morton, but I'm not entirely sure. And if it's you and I've mangled your name, sorry about that. Always wondered about an Antler fingerboard. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, Antler is quite amazing stuff. And it's shed by a living animal. So it's not something that is a product of, you know, an animal being harvested or killed, you know, hunted or whatever. And so theoretically, that should mean that there's no ethical consideration at all. It shouldn't bother anyone. And all you're left with is this wonderful material, with no qualms for using it. But I have to admit that I try to avoid using animal bits and pieces in violins as much as I possibly can. Now, I know this answer comes hot on the tail of the previous answer, where I was saying, yes, use gelatin glue, which is made out of animals. I can't help it. I'm a hypocrite, obviously. But I don't know if there's something about having that thing there, which might, I don't know. If you're comfortable with it, whoopee-doo. I suspect it will be absolutely fabulous material for the task. Personally, I wouldn't really like it because of that association. Having said that, so I've got this violin held together with gelatin glue in this hand. In this hand, I'm almost certainly holding a piece of leather, which is wrapped around the bow, which has got bits of seashells in the abalone or mother of pearl, and has got horsehair, which has almost certainly come from an abattoir in what's that big place where they all get all the horses from? Anyway, whatever. It'll come to me after I finish recording this video. I'll suddenly go, ah, Mongolia. Yes, that's it. Right, next question. Brennan 985, I think it was, last time sort of brought up bald cypress. You know, what about bald cypress? Would you think that's suitable? And with a lack of information available, I said, well, you know, does it conform to the usual tests? Does it ring? You know, do you like the look of it? Is it stable and so on? So I did a little bit more research. Yeah, I think we all know what bald cypress looks like. It's that really big tree that grows in the swamps, or not all of them do, but some of them are in those swamps in the Mississippi Valley Basin. And yeah, the classic kind of buttressed sort of tree trunks that come out of the swamp. Yeah, I mean, they're used for exterior construction, exterior furniture, docks, boat building, interior trim, and veneer. I mean, it's quite rot resistant, so apparently that's, you know, because that's quite an advantage for a lot of applications. It seems that it's largely used for those purposes. But having said that, it looks quite nice. Weight-wise, I mean, if Sitka spruce is 27 pounds a cubic foot, and bald cypress is 32 pounds a cubic foot. So it's a little bit heavier, but, you know, not massive. So yeah, I mean, it's on the face of it, that sounds doable, doesn't it? Brennan 985. Would it be worth? And so this wasn't from the Q&A, but it was about, I did this video which you may or may not have seen, with this sort of modified skeleton stroke internal mold design. Would it be worth putting some shims into the new cuts so that when you clamp ribs or blocks on, it doesn't distort the shape? Because yes, you've got a gap, so the thinking bit basically being there's a little bit of give there. It did occur to me, and basically I just pressed and saw how much movement there was and what sort of force was involved, and I thought, nah, it's going to be fine. So that's kind of my answer to that one. Not only that, but I will see if I can show you this. When I glued the blocks in, because I glued the blocks in after I'd done the saw cuts, the block is butted up against this anyway. So the 4 positions where when I cramp this bit on from there, this block is already sitting against this side, that's sitting against. So A, I wasn't that bothered because it didn't look like it was going to be such a serious effect, and B, as it happened when I popped those blocks in anyway, I kind of sidestepped that whole issue, so that worked out, I guess, nicely. Mr. Dane Bramage, rather than cutting the mold apart, could you join the removable blocks to the central frame with screws? Then it would be reusable. You could, yeah. I mean, all these bits that I'm going to take out could be fastened with a plate and screwed on and so on. Of course, the reason I put these other cuts in as well is because, you know, you can see if I just complete that cut, because of the geometry of it, this section here is trapped still anyway. So you need to be able to further subdivide that to get it out easily. Then you've got an even more complicated sort of thing being screwed together, and it is pretty much exactly what I had for my dismantleable, reusable molds. But I mean, they were the same, but they didn't break down to just leave a skeleton part of it. The whole thing broke down and then was removable. But what I was going to say is they only lasted about 3 or 4 violins anyway. This one, which is a disposable one, you can see number 41, you can see I've already used that once and that came out nicely. So I'll be using this one again at some stage. But I'm kind of, I think for the extra work involved in creating a sort of a mould that may well only last 3 or 4 violins, it's probably faster to make 3 or 4 moulds like this, because that's so simple to make. So you might think that's a little bit wasteful, but it does mean that it allows you to make variations to the mould every single time. You know what I was saying about constant improving and so on. I think that's kind of sorry, got me famous flask of tea here. So I think that's kind of important. It gives you that possibility of improving things all the time as you go. And that appears to be the last one. So yeah, however you celebrate this holiday, enjoy yourself, and I'll be putting out a couple more videos over the next week or so, but then there will be another one of these in about a week's time. So please, if you have any questions or whatever, just leave them on the bottom of this one. If you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do so. It'd be much appreciated. And like I say, if you want to be in with a chance of winning that violin next year, then have a look at me on Patreon as well. Okay, that's it. Cheers, folks. Look after yourself. Bye for now. Bye.